Harris's report, we heard Belgium's leader talking about that finance issue, the EU laying out a plan to use frozen Russian assets to help fund Ukraine with 90 billion euros over the next 2 years, in spite of that outspoken opposition from Belgium, because Belgium is where the money is stashed. The European Union's executive has been drawing up options to help plug Kyiv's looming budget black holes as Russia's punishing invasion drags on towards a 4th year. Let's bring in for more analysis of the situation Peter Zalmayev. Peter is the founder and director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, joining us live from Kyiv. Peter, as always, pleasure to have you here in France 24. Great to see you. Hope you're okay. Give us your sense of the situation now, of course. We heard Putin talking 24 hours ago about being ready to fight with Europe if Europe wants to do that. Rutte today of NATO saying NATO is ready to defend our billion people. One might hope Ukraine will figure in that, but of course we don't yet know, do we?
We don't know. Indeed, we don't know if that is the case. But we also we don't know if what Rutte says is the truth. Mark, I was just reading a leading newspaper of Spain, El País, where it actually the author wrote point blank that any average European, when faced with this sort of threat by the Russians, would most likely just withdraw into his or her nook, somewhere cozy, somewhere away from the world's problems, etc. This raises the question of whether Europe actually is mentally ready to take on the Russian threat. Vladimir Putin is actually very much aware of that, and that explains his behavior. Of course, it says the reason he mentioned that and he brought up this is strategic. It's meant to scare not just the Europeans but also the Americans. He's this bravado. We've heard this before. We heard him in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan at this regional security meeting where he said that he would be happy to continue fighting. This is par for the course for Vladimir Putin. He's played quite a sophisticated game of intimidation with the West, and nuclear blackmail, and these other statements that we've heard. He's very confident, in fact, and he's got something to back his confidence with, and that is, over the last few months, years actually, a couple of years, he's been violating the airspace, Mark, as you've probably commented more than once on your show, of several European countries, including Poland and Romania. And what response did he get? Pretty much nothing. A threat to continue debating which steps would be taken the next time. And the next time never arrives. And we are still in that same place. Ukrainians are watching this, and they're very frustrated that our backers are losing stamina, not just to continue defending us, but it's a big question whether Europe, when the push comes to shove, will be ready to stand up for its own sovereignty, its own values. Indeed, we can obviously take Rutte at his words that he says NATO is ready to defend our billion people. You mentioned the infringement of borders. There's been an incident this evening, Vilnius Airport, Lithuania, closed by balloons floating across. This is something launched from Belarus, of course, vassal state, of course, ruled by Russia, or at least manipulated by Russia in that sense, and was very clear that it was that state back in 2022 when Russian troops left there to invade Ukraine. The narrative that Putin's created, Peter, you've talked about this before, the sense that Russia is winning everything. Of course, the aim was to take the whole of Ukraine in just 3 days. That never happened. There is a section of Ukraine that is occupied now. Russia wants more. Ukraine doesn't want to give that up, and one can understand completely why that is. Were you surprised that in the meeting in Moscow there was no movement when Witkoff, Kushner were sat there with Putin? Were you surprised 5 hours later they come out with nothing? Absolutely not. I mean, that was my prediction all along. It seems like both sides, actually, paradoxically, as it may sound, both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side have been dragged into this process sort of against their will, and they're playing, they're sort of dancing this tango with the American side, because they don't want to be seen as the recalcitrant party. They don't want to be seen as the odd man out, not willing to negotiate. Ukraine, for obvious reasons, that it cannot afford to anger Trump and company, and Putin does not want to bring on any additional sanctions, and he wants to come across as this man of peace, of course. But in reality, talking about territorial concessions that Russia has demanded, that is a non-starter for, once again, paradoxically, both sides for Ukraine. And paradoxically, it goes to the root of the constitutional issue that Russia actually has written these territories, the four oblasts, the four regions of Ukraine, into its constitution as part of Russia proper. Up to the so-called administrative borders of these regions, as they are in Ukraine. And Ukraine, of course, cannot just negotiate away these regions according to Ukraine's constitution. This is up to a popular referendum. So, and on top of that, we know what happens when you give Putin an inch. We saw that with Crimea, that only whets his appetite. If he were to get the remaining part of the Donbass, I mean, he would command it a much more advantageous position from which to continue gobbling up Ukraine. And let's not forget, the remaining part of the Donbass that he wants consists of veritable town fortresses such as Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, with hundreds of thousands of our compatriots still residing there. Of course, a non-starter. Putin knows this, and he's probing for it. He knows that in any situation, it's win-win. If he were to get it without an additional shot fired, all the better. If Ukraine were, to say no, he could continue, fighting. But whatever the case may be, whichever president of Ukraine signs away those territories, the very next day he'll be out of office. I mean, this is a non-political non-starter for the Ukrainian side.
Peter, we need to leave it there. Stay safe there in Kyiv. Of course, we know that by night there will be missiles, drones aimed where you are by Russia. So do stay safe, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Zalmayev of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, as always, giving us his insight into what Ukraine is thinking. Peter, pleasure to have you with us. Do, as I say, once again, stay safe.